When Mom first told me her boyfriend was moving in, I tried to be supportive. She deserved to be happy, and I didn't want to be the bitter teenager who ruined that. But deep down, I felt uneasy. Our home was about to stop being ours. I'd only met him a few times before. His name was Rick, and he had the kind of handshake that lingered too long, like he was trying to prove something. He smiled a lot, but his eyes always looked like they were measuring you. "Give him a chance," Mom urged, her hand brushing my shoulder. "He's really good to me," and I wanted to believe her. I really did. She hadn't dated much since the divorce, and seeing her smile again made me want to root for her. The day he moved in, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Boxes stacked in the hallway, his leather recliner shoved into our living room, his tools taking over the garage. Every corner screamed, "Rick lives here now." He was overly friendly at first, calling me champ and asking about school. But even then it felt forced, like he was rehearsing for a role he didn't actually want. I played along, answering politely, waiting for the act to crack. And crack it did faster than I expected. The first week, he started making comments about the dishes. "You should help your mom more," he'd say, even though I already did. The second week, it was my laundry. "Your room looks like a pigsty." By the third week, he didn't even bother pretending. "House rules are changing," he announced one evening, clinking his beer bottle on the counter. "From now on, nobody's out past 10. I blinked at him. "Nobody? Or just me?" He smirked. "You kid. You're under my roof now, and I don't want you running wild at night." The words hit like a punch. Under my roof. It was my mom's house. My house. He was the guest here, not me. And yet he spoke like he owned the place, like my life was suddenly his to manage. Mom tried to smooth it over. "He's just looking out for you," she said softly. But her eyes darted away. She wasn't defending me, she was avoiding conflict. That hurt more than his smug grin. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my blood boiling. This man had been here less than a month, and already decided he was my warden. I knew one thing for certain. If he thought I'd roll over and obey, he was in for a rude awakening. The new curfew was just the beginning. Suddenly, Rick had an opinion about everything I did. The TV volume was too loud. I was on my phone too much. Even the way I buttered toast was wasteful. It was non-stop commentary. At first, I tried ignoring him. I told myself he'd get bored eventually, that this was just some power trip he'd abandon. But he didn't. Every day, he looked for something new to nitpick, like he was testing how far he could push. One evening, I came home from hanging out with friends at 9:45, mind you, and he was waiting in the living room. Beer in hand, lights dimmed, like some kind of sentry. "Cutting it close, aren't you?" he said, grinning. "It's before 10, I shot back, dropping my backpack by the door. "Doesn't matter. Should have been home earlier." Shows respect. Respect, that was his favorite word, but it was never about earning it. To him, respect meant control. The more he pushed, the more I felt like a stranger in my own house. Mom stayed quiet through most of this. Whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she'd sigh and say, "He's just adjusting. Don't take it personally." But how could I not? It wasn't adjusting, he was taking over. It wasn't just rules either. He started rearranging things around the house. My gaming console got shoved into a cabinet because he didn't like clutter. My posters came down because they were too juvenile. Even the fridge had Rick's shelf. The final straw came one Saturday. I had plans to see a movie with my best friend. Nothing wild, just popcorn and laughs. But as I was heading for the door, Rick stopped me. "Where do you think you're going?" "Out," I replied flatly. "Not tonight. Curfew's at 10, and I don't want you racing home after some dumb film. I'll stay here." I stared at him in disbelief. "You're not my dad? You don't get to tell me when I can or can't leave." His jaw tightened. "You live under this roof. You follow my rules." End of discussion. I turned to Mom, silently begging her to step in, to tell him he was crossing a line. But she just stood there, wringing her hands, eyes glued to the floor. Her silence felt like betrayal. I ended up canceling my plans that night, sitting in my room, fuming, while Rick watched TV downstairs like he'd won some kind of victory. It wasn't just the curfew anymore. It was the fact that my mom had chosen not to fight for me. Lying awake, I made myself a promise. If Rick thought he could rewrite my life without resistance, he was about to find out I wasn't the kind of kid who stayed quiet forever. The next few nights, I tested my limits. 10 o'clock came, and I wasn't in my room. I was on the porch, headphones in, texting friends, watching the world move without Rick hovering over me. I knew he was probably pacing the living room, checking the clock like a prison guard. I didn't care. For once, I wanted control over my own life, even if it was small, fleeting, and defiant. One night, I heard him muttering to Mom about me disrespecting the house. She just nodded, voice low. He's a teenager. That teenager comment felt like a betrayal. A shrug that said she wouldn't fight for me. I started slipping out to meet friends, going for late-night walks. Anything that reminded me I still had freedom. Rick caught me once, standing on the driveway with my hoodie zipped up, a flashlight in my face. "You're really testing me," he said. Tone sharp, like a blade. "And you're really annoying," I shot back, fists clenched. "This isn't your house. You can't control me." He laughed, but there was a twitch of frustration in his grin. "I can, and I will, champ. You'll see. Rules exist for a reason." It wasn't just the words, it was the way he stood, like he could crush me with a single glare. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping. And yet I couldn't let him win. Not now, not ever. Mom heard us yelling and intervened, stepping between us. "Rick, calm down. It's just a phase." My mother's calm sounded like a weapon aimed at me. Her words weren't protection, they were excuses, shielding him, dismissing my anger. "I'm not a kid anymore," I shouted, voice shaking. "You don't get to boss me around." Rick smirked, leaning back, but his eyes flicked toward Mom, looking for validation. She gave a small nod. Not for me, but for him. It made my stomach twist. After that confrontation, the tension in the house got worse. Meals were awkward. Passing each other in the hallway felt like walking through a minefield. Every glance, every word measured. I found myself staying in my room more. Doors closed, blinds drawn. It was my only sanctuary. The outside world became my escape, where Rick's rules and Mom's silence didn't follow. But even in my defiance, I felt guilty. I wanted Mom to be happy, but her happiness had turned into my cage. And Rick, he wasn't just a guest anymore. He was a shadow in my life, one that grew bigger every day. Lying in bed at night, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about curfew. It was about control, about power. If I didn't find a way to reclaim it, I'd lose more than freedom. I'd lose the last bit of my own voice in my house. I started keeping track of the curfew like it was a scoreboard. 10 o'clock, 10-30, 11. Each minute passed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. And every time Rick barked a warning, I ignored it with quiet satisfaction. One Friday, I decided to push things further. I told Mom I'd be at the library finishing a project, then slipped out to meet friends at the skate park. Rick was nowhere in sight, but I knew he would notice. Sure enough, when I got home close to midnight, he was sitting in the living room, arms crossed, an unreadable expression on his face. "Late again," he said, calm but threatening. "I had work to do," I replied evenly. "School project. You don't need to patrol my life." His eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me. You live here now. Rules apply to you." I felt a surge of defiance. "I live here, yes. But you don't. This isn't your kingdom. Mom's the one who decides, not you." Mom had been watching from the hallway, silent. For once, she didn't intervene. I saw a flicker of something, maybe curiosity, maybe guilt in her eyes. But she stayed quiet, and that gave me courage. "I'm done tiptoeing around you," I said, taking a step closer. "You can't control me with rules and lectures. You're just a guest. Remember that." Rick's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, like he was about to launch into a lecture or a threat. But instead, he just stared. And for the first time, I saw hesitation. Maybe he hadn't expected me to push back. From that night on, I made a rule of my own. I'd decide when I came and went, and I'd let Mom see it. Each time I broke curfew, responsibly calling friends, explaining school projects, coming home safely, I forced her to acknowledge my autonomy. The more I asserted myself, the more I noticed Rick retreating into his chair, watching, calculating. And Mom, she started asking me about my plans. Subtle at first, but it was a start. She was noticing, even if she wouldn't admit it. Still, I couldn't relax completely. Rick wasn't gone, and he wasn't harmless. Every time he made a comment, I had to be ready, sharp, calculating my words. It was exhausting, but it was freedom earned the hard way. That week, I realized something important. Confrontation didn't have to be explosive to be effective. Quiet persistence, consistency, and careful defiance could shift the balance slowly. And if I played my cards right, I could reclaim my space without starting a war. The house still felt tense, but now I had leverage. Rick couldn't just enforce rules unchecked, and Mom couldn't pretend she didn't see the unfairness. With small victories, but victories nonetheless. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. The fight wasn't over, but I had begun to carve out my territory in my own home, and that I realized was just the beginning. It all came to a head one Friday night. I'd stayed out later than usual, meeting friends at the park and grabbing snacks afterward. When I walked in, the house was dark, too quiet. Rick was waiting in the living room, arms crossed, like a general ready for battle. "You're late," he said flatly. "How many times do I have to tell you?" I stopped in my tracks, taking a deep breath. "I told you, this isn't your house. You don't get to set rules for me. I decide what time I'm home." He narrowed his eyes. "What? And what if I disagree?" "Then you'll have to live with it," I shot back, voice shaking but steady, "'cause I'm not living under your curfew anymore." Mom appeared in the hallway then, her face pale, hands wringing nervously. "Enough, both of you," she said, her voice trembling, but I didn't wait for her to step in. "I've had enough, Mom," I yelled, the words spilling out. "You let him boss me around. Make me feel like I don't belong in my own home. Do you even see what's happening?" Rick's smirk faltered, just for a moment. "I'm just trying to help." "Help," I laughed bitterly. "By controlling me? By punishing me for living my life? No, that's not help. That's taking over my family, my home, my everything." Mom's eyes filled with guilt, maybe shock. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Rick stepped closer, but I didn't back down. I had already decided I wasn't giving him another inch. "I'm not a child," I continued, pointing to myself. "I'm your son, Mom. This is my home too. I will not be ruled by someone who thinks they can dictate my life in my own house." Rick's jaw clenched. Mom looked stricken, and I felt the weight of all the weeks of anger, fear, and frustration lift slightly off my shoulders. Finally, Mom exhaled, stepping toward me. "You're right," she said quietly. "I should have spoken up sooner. I didn't realize how unfair this all felt for you." Rick's shoulders slumped. "Maybe I overstepped." His tone lacked confidence, lacking the authority he had tried to wield. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. For the first time in weeks, I felt heard. I felt like I belonged. Mom gave me a small nod, a promise that she'd protect my space, and I realized something. Sometimes the fight isn't about crushing the other person, it's about claiming your right to exist. That night, I went to bed feeling lighter. Rick stayed in his chair, muttering under his breath, but he didn't bother me. And Mom, she came in later, brushing my hair back, whispering, "I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. The next few weeks were quiet, almost peaceful. Rick still lived with us, but he no longer acted like he owned the house. Every time he tried to push boundaries, I held my ground calmly, and Mom backed me up. That made all the difference. It wasn't perfect. Still had to deal with his presence and occasional comments. But now, instead of feeling trapped, I felt respected. I realized that asserting myself didn't mean starting a war. It meant claiming my place in the home I had every right to inhabit. Mom and I started talking more. She asked how I felt, really felt, instead of brushing me off. Sometimes she admitted she had ignored my feelings out of fear of conflict. Other times she simply listened, letting me vent without judgment. That alone was a victory. Rick, for his part, began to retreat into his own space more. He stayed in his room, watched TV quietly, and only spoke to me when necessary. I didn't gloat, but I recognized the shift he learned that control wasn't his to take. I started enjoying my life at home again. Dinner conversations became lighter, without tension lurking in every word. I could hang out with friends, come home when I wanted, and even invite a few over without fear of a lecture. It was a small victory, but one that felt enormous after weeks of feeling powerless. The biggest change, though, was in me. I'd realized that respect isn't given, it's earned, demanded, and maintained. I didn't need to wait for Mom to notice or Rick to back off. I could take action, speak up, and reclaim my own life. That lesson was worth more than any victory over a curfew. Sometimes I still catch Rick glancing at me with a mix of frustration and respect, and I smile, quietly satisfied. He's still here, but he's no longer a threat. I've learned that boundaries aren't just lines on a wall, they're armor you wear, protecting your space and your voice. Mom and I have grown closer too. We joke about small things now, and she asks for my opinion more often. Rick's presence no longer overshadows us. It's just part of the background noise of our home. Manageable and no longer threatening. Looking back, I realized that the fight wasn't just about a curfew. It was about being seen, being heard, and learning that I have a voice in my own life. I can't change everything around me, but I can control how I respond, and that's powerful. And the house finally feels like mine again, not just the space I live in, but the life I live on my terms. It's a reminder that even when someone tries to take over your world, speaking up and standing firm can shift the balance. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make a home feel like home again.